welcome back to another episode of Warriors Off-Road. Today's going to be a little different. Today we're going to go over a lot of the accessories, parts, and updates and modifications that we do here at Warriors Off-Road to give you a little bit more insight instead of just having a picture and with a little paragraph on the internet. We're going to cover some electronics today, like your fuse box, your ECU. We're going to go over your steering system and some of the problems that does happen. We're going to talk a little bit about the clutch springs. We're going to talk about the bolts and nuts, which are pretty important on this vehicle. I'm going to go over some special tools, some things you can add to your vehicle, differences. I'm going to talk a little bit about our lift kit, and of course go over our gasket sets, and maybe some other questions that typically come up. There's electrical connectors we can talk about and so forth. So why don't you sit back for a few minutes and let's go over this items that we have here and see what we can do for you. Alright, welcome back. So what we're going to have here, the first thing we're going to talk about is the nuts and bolts. I mean, let's get to it. That's what keeps this thing together, right? So here I have an assortment of some of the basic nuts and bolts that are on the Strike and Sector 250. You know, Phillips screws, you have these Allen heads, hold a lot of body panels on. You have nuts and bolts for the suspension, even the lug nuts for the wheels. And the tabs that hold them on, like this. Pretty small little tab, but there's a ton of them in there. And I literally have thousands and thousands of OEM nuts and bolts takeoffs because of the problems we've had. So let's go to some of the problems. So first off, it's not uncommon for some of these to be stripped the first time you take off or remove a bolt. Even this one right here, the threads are already shiny and a little bit deformation, you know, they're a little deformed down here. They're not of the strongest quality. They do meet the minimum standard requirements. Hisun's pretty good about making sure everything meets the minimum standard requirements. But as a result, even the first time you take them off or the 100th time you take them off, I've seen them strip. I've seen the threads pull off. I've seen lug nuts pop off. I've seen a lot of issues with the stock OEM nuts and bolts. So what we offer is a nut and bolt kit. Now this kit has everything that you typically would need, the most common problems. It's going to cover things such as your front A-arm bolts, all 8 of them. It's going to cover the rear swing arm pivot. It's going to cover your shock mounting bolts. It's going to cover the rear axle where it mounts to the swing arm. It's going to cover the front bumper. It's going to cover the sway bar. It's going to cover all the basic things that you would typically utilize. Now these are actually pretty intense little nuts and bolts, way more than you'll ever need. These are grade 10 metric nuts. They are 10 by 125. They're all exact replacements. Nothing here is close or it should fit. These have all been measured and ordered, and they come to you exactly to replace everything that you take apart, and they're marked. They're zinc coated, so it's going to last a long time and not corrode. And the strength on these, you can pull them on and off and service them many times over, and not worry about the threads stripping or pulling off or coming back at you, or having one of the bolts break, or even one of the lug nuts. I get a lot of lug nuts, studs, the wheel studs that actually break off. So we offer this kit right here, and I think at a value, if you try and price it out for everything you get, we only charge $35 for this, and you're going to get so much more life out of your vehicle, not have to worry about being stuck somewhere and you can't get this off because it's either frozen or it's stripped and you're out in the desert and then it's just ruined. So yeah, give us a call here about the threads, the bolt kits. If you want to do your own, we'll be more than happy to give you all the specs, but I think at the price we're asking here, it's a great bargain for everything you need for a direct bolt-in kit. So that covers our bolt kit. Now let's move on to the next subject. Alright, next we're going to talk about steering. So what we have here is a complete unit here. This is called your steering box. This is what you'll see underneath the front end of your Hisun. Whether a Sector or Strike, it's about the same. Your steering shaft from your steering wheel comes down to here. On this plate, both your tie rods come out and join your knuckles, and that controls the steering. As you turn the steering wheel, it just turns them right and left. So this will sometimes break during a rollover or hard impact. The tie rods get jammed in here, and it tends to break some of the shafts in here. So let's take a look inside and see what this is like. So we take the cover off. So this is what we have. Again, your shaft from the steering wheel comes in here, turns this, and the gear will ride against this gear, and that, in a sense, turns your tie rods. So this style is called a fan gear. It goes back and forth. But sometimes you'll have the lower fan gear will snap or break. Sometimes this shaft up here will snap with the impact. We are working on a rack and pinion system to replace this, but we want to make sure when our system goes out that it works. I don't want problems. I want it to be just a really nice bulletproof little system. And so hopefully here in the next month or two we'll have that replaced. In the meantime, if it does break, unfortunately you got to buy the whole unit. Hisun used to sell just these two shafts alone, and they stopped doing that. So these are no longer available. You have to buy a complete unit. But they're pretty reasonable price, about $134 or so. They do not share the same splines as a Polaris 170. A lot of people say, well, I'll just get the Polaris Razor 170 and bolt it in there, maybe save a few dollars. They've gone so far as to change it, so it's just different enough that it doesn't fit. So they made sure that they're proprietary and Hisun's proprietary, although they're probably both made in the exact same factory. If you ever do get a chance, the one thing you could do is if you ever have it apart, you could open this up. Inside here, there's not a tremendous amount of grease. It's probably just enough. So I would probably open this up, and I'd probably put a lot more grease in here to make it run a little bit smoother. And the bearings themselves, the bearings do go out or seals. They're replaceable. Those we can source outside, so we don't have to buy a whole new unit. And that's what it takes. So that is your steering gearbox on your Hisun, why they fail, what happens to them. If you have any questions, give us a call. Let's move on to the next item. Let's talk gaskets. So we sell a gasket here for the 250s. Again, it fits both the same engines on both the Sector and the Strike 250, so that's a great thing to do. So our kits, we try and include everything you would need when you put this engine, to take it apart, to rebuild it, service it, maintain it, maybe change the transmission out, or do something to that effect. So we always start off with everything that I would need that's typical. So you get the center case gasket right here. You get the right and left side cover gaskets. You get the base gasket. You get the head gasket. You also get the 4 washers that go behind the head bolts or the head nuts. You want to replace these every time you torque down your head, because these take the crush of it. If you don't have these in there, you use regular washers, the threads is the one that ends up pulling out from the force. So always replace these copper washers when you're doing a head job. And of course, the timing chain tensioner gasket. Those are the items that you'll need to do a basic engine rebuild. Now there are gaskets, there are oil seals, and there are bearings. But we find that sometimes most of those can either be sourced locally from your local bearing shop, or we can get them easily enough and get a much better quality bearing or seal. But these gaskets right here for the whole kit, you're looking at about $70 for the set. It's not a bad gig. You get everything you need, and when you buy a transmission kit, these are all included in it. But if you're just doing a R&R, tearing down the engine yourself, instead of piecemealing these, because they don't sell a kit, instead of each item you have to order from Hisun separately, we sell it as a complete kit. So hopefully that'll help you doing your next engine rebuild service. All right, let's move on to the next item. Boom. All right, here we go. We've moved on to the sprocket. A lot of people are ordering our 9-tooth front sprocket. It definitely changes the gear ratio, gets you a little bit better off the line. You might lose a couple mile an hour on the top end, but most people, it's hard to notice 2 to 3 miles per hour. So a lot of people get these just to get off the line a little easier or get some more torque. So we sell these. To get those, you're going to need a couple things. So we sell the tool that's needed. We get these and then we modify them for your use right here. They're the tool required to remove that special nut that is on the front countershaft sprocket. It fits right on there, and it allows you to remove that nut or use an impact or a torque wrench on here and get it torqued down. Now another thing to mention while we're on that topic is we do sell the replacement nut. There's a lock washer that you can crimp down on here. And we have a special washer that we include in ours that the factory does not. Now this is a spring washer. It's actually a spring to lock washer, and it even says right there, outside which way it faces. So what happens when you put the sprocket on, you're going to put this one on the tabbed washer. That's going to go on the shaft inside there. Then you're going to put this special washer we sell. It's a beveled washer, and again, where the bevel faces the nut. We're going to slide that down. Then you're going to put your nut on. When you do that, we always recommend 1 drop of blue Loctite on here because you want to make sure you can remove it later. Try not to use red. It really makes it hard to come off. Now these are known to come loose, and it's always at the worst time. Trust me, they never come loose when you want them to, but when you're out in the trail and all of a sudden everything's spinning and nowhere's going anywhere, and you come back and you realize this is all gone and your sprocket's laying off. You might be able to find the sprocket if you're lucky enough, but if not, this is a really unique thread. It's a 14 by 1, so you're not going to find this at your local hardware store, your motorcycle shop, nowhere. This is a special thread and a special nut. So you're going to torque that on there to about, sometimes we go as much as 60 foot-pounds to get it on there. Again, with the drop of blue Loctite, you get that on there. An easy way to tighten this down is get somebody in there and hold your rear brake down. That prevents the rear axle from spinning. So it uses the chain as a way to hold the sprocket down. So you can get in there with, we make it so you can just use a 1/2 inch ratchet on here if you want, and torque that baby down. Once it's tight, of course, you'll find one of the tabs which is close to the slot, and you'll just bend it in there. And that should prevent this whole thing from coming loose. So we have all these available. Look on our website for the tool, the special nut, or the special washer kit, and also our 9/2 sprocket. All right, let's move on to something else and see what else we got. All right, we're back. So now we're going to cover a couple of electronic ideas or concepts we have going on. So this is what we call our ECU. You're going to find this in the sector underneath the driver's seat, facing towards the front of the vehicle. On the Strike, it's going to be underneath the driver's seat, underneath the seat rail. You're going to open up the battery compartment area, and it's going to be mounted inside there. The easy way to identify the two between the fuse box and the ECU is the ECU only has 2 plugs, and they're pretty big. The fuse box has 3. That's how we can identify them. Also, this has 4 screws which hold the cover on. So sometimes I get people calling me saying, hey, it just died, nothing's on, there's no power, or something's going on. First thing I tell them while they're on the weekend is to check your fuses. What I would recommend doing first off is opening this up, and you're going to see the fuse guide that's inside the cover. This is going to tell you what fuses where and what controls what. But check all your fuses. I would carry spare fuses with you. You can put them in a Ziploc bag, but at least 1 or 2 of each of these, and just throw them in your tow vehicle or the main truck you took out there. More than likely you've popped one of these fuses, and that's what happens. And they're real easy to change. So again, you got to slide the seat out. You got to use a wrench to take your seat tray out. Once that's out, there's a little plastic cover. You pop it up, and you'll have access to all this. So you just use a Phillips, open this up, test all your fuses, find out which one's blown, and put it back together, and you'll be able to enjoy your weekend without ruining your trip and getting your kid upset at you. No, none of us want that. That would be horrible. Oh my gosh. Kid getting upset at mom and dad? What's the world come to? Again, these just Phillips, you can just bolt it right down, screw them right down, and again, it's going to make sure you don't ruin your weekend. So keep some spare fuses with you. Now you know how to identify the ECU and the fuse box and where your fuses are. All right, let's move on to the next item. Let's see what we got. All right, well, since we're on the topic of electronics, let's cover this. This is our accessory plug. Now on the back of the Hisuns, the 250s, whether it's going to be a Sector 250 or a Strike 250, there's a rubber boot in the very back. Both taillights have wire harness that goes into this rubber boot. Well, inside that rubber boot is a plug that goes nowhere. What's it do? Wow. Well, this allows you to plug into that, snaps right in there, and you can attach it to any one of your accessories. What that does is when you hit your light switch, this gives you powered circuit back there that is fused and relayed. So no more fiddling with trying to run wires somewhere or hit a relay or put an inline fuse or a circuit breaker. You can tap your a whip flag, a lighted whip flag. You can do some LED lights in the back, a license plate light for some of those states that these are still illegal in. So it just goes right into your factory harness, so you don't have to cut anything and solder and make a mess out of it. and it's really nice. I can plug these in. We have them set up to our lighted whip flag. So when we're out off-roading at night and he turns it on, it's great. When the lights are on, the flag's on. And when he's done, he turns the lights off, the flag comes off, so I know he's not going to kill and drain my battery. So this is a great little accessory. We sell these here. And they just clip right in. It's a great thing to add to your vehicle for such a low cost. Give us a call. Now let's move on to, what do we have? Let's talk lift kits. All right. Oh, here we go, lift kit. So I designed these. They're computer designed. They're laser cut, powder coated. And they include everything you need to mount these inside of here. You don't have to look for any screws, nuts, washers, or bushings. There's no cutting, there's no welding, there's no modifications of any sort. These brackets right here go in the rear and they mount. You remove your existing shock and this goes in place of it. And they come with instructions, and we have instructions on our website. And then your shock will mount up here, so you can use your existing shock. Or you can use aftermarket shocks if you have them as well. Again, we use our grade 10 bolts on here that are zinc coated, even the nuts. And even our aluminum spacers in here are coated for corrosion resistance. I think you really like these. Those are easy to put on the rear. You can put on just the rear or just the front or all four if you'd like. It raises it just a little over 2 inches. Our fronts, as we like to call the dog bone, again, come with all the material you're going to need, all the nuts and bolts. You simply unbolt the front ones, and this replaces the upper shock mount up here. Laser cut, computer design. These things are really nice, real easy to put in. I've had kids as young as 11 years old putting these in by themselves. I would always recommend some adult supervision to make sure they're torqued properly, but I'm telling you, I've seen kids do this no problem. This is a real no-brainer. It's real easy to do, and I think you'll like these. When you do the lift kit, the one thing you got to keep in mind, the way the suspension is designed, the tie rods are longer than the A-arm. So when the suspension goes up or down, the wheels tend to do this. So right now the toe end is perfect on the vehicle. So when you do a lift kit, the toe end starts to go like this because you're raising it 2 inches, so it's pushing it down, so it wants to do this. So what you're going to have to do is when you do the lift kit, you will have to do the toe end adjustment, the front wheel alignment. That's included in the instructions. We have a video online right now on our website that shows you how to do a wheel alignment for those of you who have trouble reading or can't understand my instructions. We have a video made for you. So make sure when you do your lift kit, make sure you do your front wheel alignment. I think your tires and your steering is going to benefit from it. Otherwise, you get a real quick steering, and nobody wants that. It's not safe. It's not fun. So do your wheel alignment, put the lift kit in, have a blast, and let's move on to clutches. Wow, we got a lot of clutch stuff here. Let's go over it step by step. So this is what we call the secondary clutch. This is actually on the transmission side of the vehicle. When you open your CVT belt cover, you'll have a clutch up front towards the engine. That's called your primary. That's also what we call in the industry a variator. It has your sliding weights, your rolling weights inside there. But this is actually the clutch part itself. So when you slide this out, you're going to see this side and the belt on here, and then you're going to see the variator, the smaller one's a variator. So this is your main clutch. So this will slide out. Typically your bell, your clutch bell will stay inside the vehicle, but if not, it'll come out with it. So we have a couple things here. This is a stock spring that comes out of here, real soft and gushy. And then we have a yellow and a red one here. So typically we call these by RPM. So instead of saying a yellow or red one, you'll say this is the stock one is roughly 1,000 RPM spring. The yellow one is what we would call a 1,500 RPM spring, and the red one is what we call a 2,000 RPM spring. What that effectively means is that when the engine reaches a certain RPM ratio, then it allows the clutch here to start opening up in the sheave. And what that does is that once that RPM is reached, then it will slowly open up and change the gear ratio. As the belt rises up, it will change the speed in the rear. So the stock one opens up almost immediately because you're already right around 1,000 RPM at idle. So with the yellow one here, 1,500 RPM and 2,000 RPM, this one allows you to stay in lower gear range in the ratio a little bit longer before it starts to collapse and push out. So these are great for the weekend warrior. Somebody who just wants to have some fun. A nice bite on there, a little bit more performance out of your clutch. Typically the red one is for our racers to really launch hard and get off the line. I think you'll really like either one of these, depending on what you're going to do. We saw a lot of the yellow ones. We call them the mid-level, and then we got these that are high performance. Now inside the clutch shoes itself, if this was taken off and upside down, you're going to find the actual clutch shoes. Now the clutch shoes are controlled by springs. As the clutch comes out, centrifugal force will push this out against the bell and engage the clutch. So these are held in by springs. And again, they're rated at the same RPM. So we have stock ones are basically 1,000 RPMs. They start coming out and locking up already. Then we have the yellow ones, 1,500 springs. And we have the red ones, which are 2,000 RPM springs. So if you wanted to really get into your clutch tuning and really get some performance out of it, you would take this apart. You would change your main torque spring, and then you would open it up, and inside your clutch, you would replace these. They're often referred to as pillow springs because they come inside of here, inside the clutch itself. You can call them clutch springs, but this is also called a clutch spring. It gets really confusing. So I like to call this torque spring, and I'll call this my pillow spring. So you get in here and change these, and you can fine tune it. Sometimes it takes a while to really tune into what you want to do. And we can really get into weeds and start getting into the pillow springs, the torque springs, and then even weights on your slider weights on your variator. The stock ones are 21 grams for those who want to know about the stock front weights, rolling weights. We have a lot of success with our 18-gram weights on here. It tends to free spin a little bit better. But even a high-performance stock ones, stock weight, a better material tends to last a lot longer. The roller weights in the variator do wear out, so those are something you're going to have to keep an eye on. So that's our clutch stuff. This is what we offer. Check on our website for pricing and availabilities. We sell out of these very fast. So if you have any questions, please contact us with any questions about what's going on. We try and stock these as much as possible. And if you have any information or want to know how to take this apart or service it, we have a video on our website about the Hisun 250 clutch that gives you more insight on how to change the spring and what these do and how they mean it. Let's go on to the next item. Let's see what we got. All right, well, what do we got here? This is our new hitch for the Sector 250. I say Sector 250 because it will not fit on the Strike 250. There's little differences I'm going to go into next about why they're different. The frames are the same, but everything in between is mounted differently. So this won't fit on a Strike. We're working on the Strike trailer hitch, but we have a lot of people that ask about this one, and not too many ask about the Strike. So let's get into how this bad boy works. What's included is the hitch itself and the tool you'll need. The great thing about this is so easy to put on. It's just crazy. So this one is mounted with 6 Allens on here. And I believe the threads are 1/4-24. I'm not 100% on there. I'll have to check on it for you. But basically, when you get this in the mail, there's no cutting, there's no welding. All you're going to do is take your tool, take these end plates off, or end caps, whatever you want to call them. You'll take both of them off. You'll set it inside the frames itself, the main uprights, and they'll go right against the frames. And then you're just going to take these and you're going to bolt them right in there. And you're going to screw this up and tighten them up to your heart's content. Now, something you want to keep in mind when you're installing this on your Sector 250 is there are two, I'm going to call them plastic shields, splash shields that are right inside here. If you want to remove those, it'll make getting to these a whole lot easier, but it can be done with keeping those in place. All you're going to need is an Allen wrench and a Phillips screwdriver, and you can take those off. There's 4 screws, I think. So each one, it just allows you a little easier access. They are angled at a certain way. You can see this right here, and this is level. If you try to put this in this way, your hitch will come out like this. It will not work. This hitch can only go in one way. It is an 1.25 inch receiver tube. It's made for light duty work. Now, Hisun does not warranty your vehicle if you have a hitch on there, because the clutch is not designed to tow heavy things. It's a very small clutch. So a lot of people will use this on farms for cedars or towing little trailers around and whatnot. If you do have to take it in for warranty work, I do suggest you remove this before you go in to alleviate any questions about customer abuse on the clutch. But it's a great little tool. It works really nice. People tow it around for farms, for works. I've seen them at schools. I've seen them at municipalities. They need some kind of hitch on there to tow things around there. And that's what's included. So this is a great accessory to your Sector 250. I think you'll like it. I think you should put it on right now. But, you know, that's just me talking. What do I know? All right, now let's talk about the Sector 250 and the Strike 250 and the differences. Let me get rid of this. All right, so a couple things to go forth here. The Sector and Strikes, they share a lot of things. They share the same engine, transmission, same electronics, suspension, very similar. Not exactly the same, but very similar. So there's some things that are different. So the seating's different, obviously. You have 2 bucket seats in a Strike, and you have a bench seat in the Sector. A little easier to get in and out on the Sector. The Sector has a different roll cage. Its center of gravity is a little bit taller because it's a utility vehicle, as the Strike's more sportier. Where the engine is mounted is very close, but not the same. It's mounted a little bit far forward. So in the Strike, the front countershaft sprocket is exactly at the same pivot as the swing arm. That's why the chain adjustment, there's hardly any slack in that chain because it never changes throughout a cycle. On the Sector 250, it's offset, so the engine is placed a little bit forward of the rear swing arm pivot. So as it goes up and down, it does change. So there needs to be more slack in the Sector chain adjustment than the Strike. The rear swing arm on a Sector is shorter than the Strike, about 4 or 5 inches shorter. It has the same brakes, same sprockets, same rear axle. That's all the same right there. Everything on the engine is identical. You can take anything and buy it for the Strike. It'll go right on the Sector's engine. The transmission, any of the parts inside the engine, the gasket kits, that's all the same. How to change your oil is the same. It's easy to access from the bottom. You take the plastic skid plate off. You're going to see 2 drain plugs. One's a small one, just a bolt. That's your main drain plug. There's a larger one, an aluminum one. Now, when you open that up, it's held in place by an O-ring. Behind it's a metal screen. So basically, it's your very first oil change. I would open that up to look for debris. If you have a major catastrophe or engine failure or something in transmissions, cattywampus, you can open that up and look for metal to verify your problem. Other than that, the only time you'll ever open that up is for an inspection like that. Normally, you'll just use the regular 17mm nut, and that's how you drain your oil. The oil in these takes about 1.2 to 1.5 quarts, about 1.5 quarts. And that's with the filter change. I always recommend pouring a little oil in the filter before I put it on with a little bit of just a finger worth of oil on the O-ring, and then snug it up on there as well. On the older ones, 2019 and older, they have a sight glass that's on the side. Now that'll be on the driver's side. It'll be located right in front of the front sprocket. There's a big plastic cover. So right in front there's a little 1 inch, about an inch and a quarter hole that looks dark. Well, that's your sight glass. The oil is dark, so of course that's dark. So you want the oil to come right to the very top of that sight glass and just fill it, no more. So as you watch it, fill it, you can see it in there. It's kind of hard to get to and see to. Some people, you can use a flashlight to get in there, maybe a mirror and a flashlight, but that's where it is, and that's how you tell your oil level. But basically, if you put 1.5 quarts and no more, it'll be just enough oil for this thing. As far as what kind of type, I mean, the manual says 1040 on here. What brand, whether you use regular oil, synthetic oil, semi-synthetic, that's really up to you. I have been around vehicles my entire life. I'm 53 now. I did 20 years in the military under heavy, harsh conditions. I've seen vehicles. I've never seen an engine fail because of defective oil. So whether you just go get regular crude oil or you get high-speed synthetic, that's entirely your choice. Just make sure it's changed frequently, and at least once a year. It doesn't hurt to change it. And make sure you're using motorsports oil too. Don't go to the auto parts store and get 1040 that's made for a Volvo or your Chevy or so forth. The viscosity is different. Those engines typically rev 4,000 RPM on a daily basis, whereas these things rev 9,000 RPM when we're out having fun, 7,000 to 9,000 RPM. So the viscosity is different. So make sure you go to your local motorcycle shop, support them by getting the oil there. And it's only 1.5 quarts. You're not spending a lot of money. I got a diesel outside and the thing takes 10 quarts. It kills me. So just get a couple quarts on here and you're going to be fine. Let's go over some of the other basic things. The chain. The stock chain is a 520 O-ring, but it's a very minimum quality. I'm not going to say poor. It'll last you a little while, but it will wear out quickly. If you get the chance, go to your local motorsports store, motorcycle shop, ATV, UTV store, and get a 520 O-ring chain. Not a 530, 520. Now, there's different lengths because in different years they change gear ratio, so the sprockets change. So you'll see a 38 rear sprocket for the older ones or a 42 tooth for the newer ones. I tell people typically just sometimes you'll have to buy in a larger chain than you need, and never the size you want. Get a 520, get about 80 links in there, and go home and you'll take out whatever links you need. Now you can use a chain removal tool, take out the links, or you can grind out the pin, whatever you need. But get about 80 links, and then you'll be able to suit it for what you need. You may have changed your rear sprockets to different sizes too. So get about 80 links, and I think you'll be happy with it. But get a good quality chain. It's going to run you about 50 bucks. If you get a $20 or $30 chain, you're about the same quality as the one you had, and it won't last very long. I've seen people spend $120 on a chain. I don't know that you need it unless you're racing. We do a lot of racing with these out here in Southern California. But yeah, just a 50 some odd dollar chain, that'll get you a good chain. It'll last you quite a few years. As far as the air filter goes, we found out the stock air filter, if it's clean, it works amazing. Nothing wrong with it. You don't need to spend money on a filter. Now, we do have different filter. Uni makes a filter sock that goes over there that's really nice. It's a performance filter. But we also found out that the Yamaha 660 Rhino, that air filter, an aftermarket one, we happen to use AFE, big lovers of AFE here, shout out. But you can use whatever you want. But a Rhino 660 air filter will fit in the airbox. It is tight. People put the cover on and say, oh, it doesn't fit. You just have to give it a little love, and it will go in there. It will fit, and you won't have any problems. It's not crushing it or anything like that. It's just a tight fit. So Rhino 660 air filter, whatever brand you choose that you're in love with, knock your socks off and go get it. Have some fun. Some other things we can talk about is the fuel tanks are a little different on the Sector compared to the Strike. The Strike has a cross member that goes from side to side where your seatbelts mount. It's a metal cross member, but it also acts as part of the hold down for the fuel tank. On a Sector, it doesn't have that. So it uses 3 mounts to hold the fuel tank in, where the Sector uses 2. And that's because the Strike relies on that cross member to hold it down, and the Sector doesn't have that cross member there. Some other things you might want to look at. Battery. Maybe you're not driving this every day, so the battery's dying on you. So it's basically a YTX 9BS battery. Now, whether you use AGM, lithium ion, or a standard lead battery, that's your privilege and your choice on what you choose. I use an AGM battery. This thing does a lot of bouncing around here, and I can get them anywhere, $50 to $100, depends on the manufacturer and where I'm purchasing them. And they tend to last me a couple of years, and I forget to put it on the charger all the time, so these batteries really go through a lot of abuse for me. What I would recommend, though, if you get a lithium-ion battery, it's great, nice, it lasts forever, but you have to get a lithium-ion charger. That's the only difference. The AGM and the lead cell, you can use the standard battery charger for that. All right. So what else we got here? Seatbelts. Seatbelts factory come with a 3-point connector, which is fine for putting around. We typically go with a 4-point harness on here because it's not always my kid driving it. I'm in here a lot more. Now my kid, he's 13 years old, but he's 6'1", he's 185 pounds, he's huge. He's almost past me. But I'm in here playing around because I use it for a pit bike and have fun. So I end up typically using a 4-point harness on here on the Strikes. You can get them from Bartech. There's a link on my website for the seatbelts. They do an amazing one. It's a 1-button click, it comes off. It's padded, it's nice, and it's adjustable enough for the kids as well as the adults. I love it. Some of the other things you get on here, if you're going to mount something to the roll cage for a light bar or for a whip flag or anything like that, it's 1.5-inch roll cage. Just look at your accessory mounts for 1.5-inch roll cage. I think you'd be happy with just about anything that's out there. As far as anything else goes, we sell some other things. We sell wheel spacers, which are nice. When you're doing our lift kits especially, you're raising it up 2 inches. We typically recommend to get our wheel spacers on here because now the center of gravity is up a little bit more, so we want to bring that back to where it was designed to be. So with the wheel spacers, it puts the wheels out just a little bit enough to bring that center of gravity back where it was. And we have those on our sites for a little over $100. They mount right on. You can use your existing lug nuts on here. They're stronger and longer wheel lug nuts or lug studs than the factory has, of course, too. Another thing we offer is we have adapters for the rear. Now, some of the racers out here in Southern California, this is a big deal. But we found out some people going off-roading like what we do too. So we have an adapter you can put on the rear. Now what that does is it takes the stock wheel and takes it off. When we buy a set of Yamaha Banshee or Raptor 700 or Warrior front wheels, and we mount them on the back. So now the entire vehicle only uses 1 wheel. So it changes the rear bolt pattern from a 4x115 to a 4x156. Now when we go off-roading and out in the desert, we have a mount that we have 1 spare on the vehicle, and that covers any 4 wheels that we have a blowout or a puncture, and we have to worry about it. The racers like it because the rear wheel now follows the exact front wheel in the grooves in the racetrack, so it's nice. It gives you a little bit more height, not enough to really brag about, but it works really nice. So a lot of our vehicles on the West Coast tend to do that. They'll go with one wheel for the whole vehicle instead of having two mixed match. Then you got to bring the spares or a plug kit. So we like to do this. It's kind of a way to go. Some of the other things you can go with. Some of the other basic maintenance you want to deal with is things like brake fluid and coolant flush. As the years go on, these things tend to crystallize and they break down. Their efficiency doesn't work. So make sure you change your coolant every couple of years. Flush your brake fluid. Don't just bleed it, but flush it out. That stuff crystallizes, and especially if water and contaminants get inside of it. It really breaks down and turns everything hard and crusty. It doesn't take very long to get in here and bleed it out and put fresh blade fluid in the system. If you have a power bleeder, you can probably do it in 20 minutes and you're done, maybe a half hour. That's about all we have for today. I wanted to go over the whole vehicle. I wanted to let you know some of the things we're doing. We're coming out with some roll cage and door stuff in the future, a little sneak peek about some bolt-on kits like that. So keep checking back with us about our roll cages, about our bolt-on doors, our full metal doors. If you have any questions about our lift kits, our electronics, our clutch issues, even our engine modifications that we do a lot of porting and we do some power mods to the engine. Let us know. We do a lot of ECU tuning. Send us your ECU. It's $50 to get that thing tuned. After 2015, Hisun had wanted to make sure they were legally covered, so they lowered the engine tune, and they also changed the transmission. So they used to be doing 50 miles an hour. If you got a 2015, they were the fastest ones out there. Now with the gear ratio and the ECU, they were doing 30, 32 from the showroom floor. Just by sending me your ECU alone, I can get you almost 40 miles an hour. I can get you 8 to 10 miles an hour just from your ECU tune. What's happening is that your ECU is not revving up all the way either. So the belt is not effectively riding up on the clutch all the way. And so you're not getting all the speed you can. So by opening up the RPM, the clutch will open up, the belt will rise up the full extent of your CVT system, and will give you that extra mile per hour. We also have a two-piece sprocket, so you don't have to tear down the entire rear axle just to put on a sprocket. We have chain guards available. We have different modifications how to make the chain adjusters here so much easier to operate than what came from the factory. We have a lot more entailed, so keep checking back with our website. Send us questions, comments you have. Let us know what you're looking for. Maybe we can start developing those. We do a lot of R&D. We have a rig here that only has 150 hours on it and it's 5 years old, but all that's been done, it's a mule. We just test and test and test. So that's all we have for today. Give us a call back on warriorsoffroad.com, and we hope to see you out in the desert or on the trails or in the sand pretty soon. Have a good day. Bye.